Welcome to the front row. I'm your host, Brad Rowe, and this is a space where unfiltered stories of the human condition get told. Pull up a chair. How's it going, front row listeners? So I am here with Stephen Reel.
How's it going?
Stephen and I met at the gym about 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah, during the winter,
Yeah.
spring, late spring, early spring.
Picked up some conversations about, helping him with his health and fitness journey. And one day we met up at a coffee shop to kind of dive in and talk about that. And next thing you know, we start talking about life.
Right.
And Stephen has a hell of a story.
Yeah. Most people would never guess the things that I've been.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to thank you for coming on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you having me on. And like I said, hopefully there's somebody out there that this just resonates with, that this can touch. Because at the end of the day, sharing my story, and my story isn't for me, it's for you. And so hopefully somebody else out there can get some benefit from what I've been through.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I guess every story has an origin story, and that starts with our childhood.
It does. Yeah. So I had a very unique childhood. I was raised by a couple iron-fisted parents, one being from the mountains of Montana, where we're at now, and the other one being from the plains of Oregon, pretty much on the Oregon-Idaho border. And I guess to start out with my dad, he was a very ornery person, to say the least. He didn't have a father. He grew up basically without a mother, being bounced around from home to home. He was a very angry person, and he didn't know how to deal with any of that anger. So anger and violence and rage and fighting was his way to deal with that. And he started teaching me that at a very young age, like we talked about briefly. And I don't know if it was his intention to instill that in me, or if it was his intention to just toughen me up and get me ready for the world as he saw it. I'm not sure. But like I'd said to you before, he used to slap box me when I was a kid at the age of as young as I can remember, 2 or 3, as soon as he could do it. And then when I would finally get tired of him doing it to me because it hurt, he would and I'd start to fight back. He would just grab my head and hold me at an arm's length away and just laugh while I tried to attack him or whatever else. And that in itself, I think, really instilled a bunch of insecurity in me and a bunch of low self-esteem, because for one, I had my own father basically tormenting me and beating me up and not understanding why. And then at the same time, I didn't have the ability to stop him. It was something I couldn't control, and it just happened over and over again until one day it didn't. So I think a lot of the insecurity and just low self-esteem, low self-worth that a lot of us have that we never really learn how to deal with, I think that's where that came from initially. But I mean, he wasn't a bad dad. I don't think he did it with malintentions or anything like that. I think it was just he didn't have a dad. He had no clue how to raise a kid, especially another young man. And so he just did what he thought was right, regardless of whether it was or not. And mom was worse. She was a mom and she nurtured her kids and things like that, but I wouldn't call her a loving mom. Like I said before, I don't ever remember going and snuggling up on the couch next to her, laying under a blanket, watching TV with her. I do remember her being the first person to ever break my nose, though. I think I was 12, 13, something like that. I got in a fight with my sister and decided it was a good idea to slap her or something like that. And as soon as mom found out, just without warning at all, she punched me right in the nose, broke my nose, and just walked away. That was her way of dealing with it. And bless her heart, she was a good lady. She's passed now, but it was those young things that I went through as a kid that, unknowing to me, actually instilled a lot of trauma in me. My first initial defense mechanism for anything when I was a kid was to get angry and fight, because that's what I was taught since I was essentially a baby. And I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to talk about things, or I didn't know how to accept somebody else's opinion. If I didn't like what they thought, then all of a sudden I want to fight you, because that's kind of the way I was raised up. And obviously I know now that's not the way to be. And that's just kind of on the self-esteem and emotional side of it. But at the same time, like I've battled lust, as you know, like a lot in my life. It's like one of my oldest addictions actually is lust. And it all boils back to when I was about 4 years old. And I caught a glimpse of my dad looking at a Playboy centerfold. And that's where the lustful addiction had started. And it was shortly after that I was molested by one of my sister's friends when I was about 5. We moved when I was almost 6. So I was about 5 or something like that. And at the time, being a young kid, like a young boy actually, and having a girl do something like that to you that's older, like I didn't see it as wrong. It wasn't until later in life that I realized that lady took advantage of me and she completely molested me and took advantage of my innocence. But when you're a young kid, especially watching your dad look at Playboys and things like that. You're like, oh, cool, let's do that again. But in life, like that is not good.
Right.
And
How old were you there? You said
4 or 5. We moved to the different house right around that same time. So I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
When that first encounter happened.
You said that you're not supposed to sex.
No, not at all. And it wasn't just like fooling around. It was as far as a 4 or 5-year-old could go, and like oral sex and all kinds of stuff like that on both sides. Like it was a full-blown sexual experience, and I still remember it. It never dawned on me until actually within the last few years when I started working on some of the stuff that we've talked about and actually getting a trauma counselor and working through why does Stephen do some of the things that he does. I remembered it, but it didn't dawn on me as, well, this is where your root from lust came from. Right. But it is. That's one of the reasons, like, I chased girls and did all the things that I did for so many years was because I thought it was normal.
Right. Well, that, and, as you said, like you didn't really have that nurturing mother. And we just talked about that of now you're trying to fill that void from a female perspective and feeling whole. Let's be honest, like when we have sex for that moment, we feel like we're worthy. We feel like someone wants us.
Exactly.
So you're filling that unworthiness and a lack of nurturing love from this sexual experience.
Right. And it's funny you say that. I learned a couple of years ago, I was in a men's group type thing. And there was this older gentleman there. I don't even remember his name. I can remember what he looked like, but he said, it took me 4 wives to realize sex isn't love. And you just touched on that, and it's true. And it didn't dawn on me. Like that man taught me that, like, sex is not love, people. It is absolutely 100% not love. Yeah. But I was in my 40s before I realized that after being with how many women I can't tell you.
Right.
And it's not. And I mean, it's a great thing and it's God given, and intimacy is a wonderful thing, but sex isn't intimacy. It is part of it, but it is not intimacy at all.
Intimacy, into me, you see.
Oh, wow. I never took it like that. Yeah.
And you can't see someone when you're sucking face or you're connected to them.
Right.
Trying to see their soul.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, you said you lost that innocence. And through our conversations that we've had, like we've talked about, like there's so much alignment through like
we have
the parenting that we went through, like the mothers that were just, that had to be in survival mode, that were just tough and ruled with an iron fist. We weren't allowed to be emotional. Like you both mentioned, like when we'd cry, it was I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
And out came a frying pan or something else.
My mom's favorite thing was the willow tree.
Okay.
Go pick a stick.
Yeah.
And if it was a stick that broke, she went and picked the stick.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was her favorite thing, was go pick a stick. Yeah. And back to the molestation thing. That was the first experience with that. I don't know if I told you about the second one. I think I did. But the second time was being from a big family. I had an aunt that was handicapped, and so she didn't work or anything. And she was older, but we had a bunch of cousins, and we would all hang out at my grandma's house. And one summer at my grandma's house, and I was probably 7, 8, maybe. Couldn't have been much older than that. Was there, and my cousins were there, and some of their friends and stuff were there. Well, one of them pulled me aside. Next thing I know, we're in the bathroom, and we're having this other sexual experience. And she's, do this, do that, do this. And I was, okay. And again, not understanding that it was wrong. And after previously being through an experience like that, I thought this was completely normal. And so I went through that as well. And that's something that I haven't talked about or even thought about in years. I can't tell you the last time I thought about that, but it was after our conversation at the coffee shop, because our stories did resonate, and just the conversation we had then, I started thinking about stuff. And I think that deeply impacted me as well, because it kind of solidified to me, this is normal. Right. Like, this is sex. It doesn't mean anything. Like, just do this with anybody or whatever. It's just sex. And that started me down a completely different path, because I was almost a teenager, of just pursuing women for the pursuit and nothing more.
Yeah. That's, I mentioned on the podcast about my being molested by older cousins, and the flip side, mine was boys doing that to me. So there was a shame and guilt behind that. You knew it was wrong, but these were older people that I looked up to. And so it was like, okay, just kind of follow along every time it happened. And this went on for years. Every time it happened, you're just like, this is wrong, but just do it, because you're kind of coerced into it. So you kind of get this really mixed perspective of what life's supposed to be like, this devil's delusion.
Exactly.
What sexuality is. And then I had another similar instance of, I was probably 10 and I had a house, someone babysitter, female this time, who had done some sexual thing. And like you said, now here I am with a girl So like now I'm going and bragging to my guy friends like, oh, I did this with with my 17-year-old, babysitter, kind of like bragging about it. And that just kind of
at the age of around 10 or whenever I was, 9, 10, whenever that happened, 8, whatever it was, I did the same thing. I went to school and bragged about it. And it happened more than once that summer. It wasn't just the one encounter. But yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And I think you touched on something else. I think I actually was shameful around it because inside I knew it was wrong, but at the same time I enjoyed it and I thought it was right. And so I had that internal conflict of, should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? Why am I ashamed to tell people about this? Why don't I want mom and dad to know about this? Right. But yet, why do I like it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot to be processing at a young age like that.
Right.
We're just supposed to learn how to do math at the time. Learn how to play outside.
I didn't get good at math until later.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess parlaying into that. So, I mean, a lot of other things started at a very young age for you. Talk about alcohol and drug use.
Yeah. Alcohol started almost as young as I can remember, man. I started stealing beer from my dad when I was 9, around there, 8, 9, something like that. I mean, he had, like a lot of people now, have a beer cooler or whatever else, but he had a little mini fridge in our living room that was always full of Ham's beer. When I used to steal them, and I would take off on my dirt bike and ride down to the river. And I hated the taste of it, so I would just drink it as fast as I could. Just to get drunk. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was doing, right? But that's what I was doing. Yeah. And then after they divorced, a couple of years later, mom was a vodka drinker, but not a heavy vodka drinker. Every once a month, maybe she'd have a daiquiri or whatever, but there was always a handle of vodka in the food pantry. And so I would come home from school, and again, I hated the taste of it. And so I would just drink as much as I could, as fast as I could, in one big chug. And it got worse and worse, to the point of one time I basically drank myself into a blackout at the age of maybe 12. And I passed out in the living room floor. After getting sick in my bedroom, I came out in the living room and everybody was watching TV, and I just laid down on the living room floor and I passed out. And I must have been laying there for an hour or something. I don't know how long I was there, but it was long enough for my mom to notice, hey, he hasn't moved in a while. And I could hear her talking to me like we all are when we're drunk, like you can hear it, but I couldn't move. I physically couldn't move. And finally she was talking to my stepdad. She's, honey, something must be wrong with him. You need to go check. And I heard the panic in her voice, and that allowed me to jump up. And I was like, oh, I tricked you, and just kind of tried to play it off, and went back into my room. And I remember I went back into my room, and for whatever reason, there was a plate in there. And I puked on this dinner plate, and it got all over the floor. And I passed out again and woke up the next day. And that continued from that age. I used to steal booze from places and all kinds of stuff. My mom caught me taking a fifth of whiskey to school one time when I couldn't have been more than 14, something like that. And I don't know how the hell she knew. It was wintertime, and I had a big old puffy coat on, and I was out the door. And all I hear is, Steven, come here. And I come back in. She's like, what's in your pocket? And I was like, what do you mean? And she ends up finding this bottle of whiskey. And my dad is an alcoholic, and so he always drank R&R. And so it was like the old square bottle of R&R that she found. And she took it from me, and I went to school. Well, then being the kid that I was, I snuck into her room and found where she'd hid it, and I kept drinking it. And then I realized she's going to know this is gone. So I fill it with water and put food coloring in it. And she ends up finding it because it separated. The food coloring had fallen out of the water. And I got the stick for that as well. And then that just turned into a drug addiction, actually, which completely derailed me, actually, the alcohol thing, because it turned into a drug addiction. I got introduced to methamphetamines the first time when I was 13 in homeroom. And my mom, one of her good friends growing up, her name was Beanie. She ended up marrying into a 1%er bike club family. And so I hung out with those kids. Like, I was over there on the weekends hanging out with her son and all the other stuff. Well, her nephew, his name was Jason, and his family was in the same circles and all that stuff. Well, he had stole a bunch of crack from his stepdad and brought it to school in this Tic Tac container. And I never did it that day, but the fact that it was in a candy container and I'm watching him snort crank off the desk in homeroom, like I was just, finally I was like, oh, I want to try that. And it was like a day or two later, I was high on crank, and that addiction didn't stop. I was a full-blown crank meth addict at the age of 13, but it got really bad into 14, 15, and my parents didn't know. And that was back again in the early 90s when it wasn't really popular. Like, it was more popular on the East Coast back then than it was on the West Coast. It wasn't really that popular, but I would stay up, and people don't believe it, but I would stay up for weeks at a time. And then I would crash out and go to sleep for 2 or 3 days. And then I would stay up for weeks at a time again. And again, being in that lifestyle and around all those bikers, I've always been a fairly intelligent person. And so they started using me, and I didn't realize what they were doing until later in life. But at first it was like, hey, Stephen, go get these chemicals. And it was like pseudoephedrine pills, and mini thins was a thing back in the 90s. And so it'd be mini thins, and it'd be like, go buy all these mini thins, because who's going to think anything weird about a teenage kid buying mini thins, right? So I'd go buy those, and then like breaking down matchbooks. And I grew up on a ranch, and so we always had like iodine and stuff like that. And those were the precursors to make meth. And so when I walked into the feed store, people didn't think anything weird, because I would go in there with my family and I could go in and buy gallons of iodine and nobody would think anything about it because we had livestock. And then one thing led to another, and I figured out all the different components and how to break them down. Well, then you just have to mix them together. And so at the age of 16, I was a meth cook, and I was not only cooking meth for all these bikers and helping them cook all this meth, but I was doing it on my own. And it started this animosity to where that was about the age that I realized that they were using me. And that's where the anger kicked in. And I was basically like, F you guys, like I can do this myself. I don't need you. Well, they didn't like that very well, because it created competition for them. And I ended up getting told on by one of them. And I was 17 the first time I got arrested for manufacturing meth. And I'd already been getting locked up before that for robbing houses and stuff like that to feed my addiction, as we talked about. But when I was 17, I got arrested for manufacturing. I ended up getting sent to a place in just outside of Bend, Oregon. It was a military school. I don't remember the name of it. But anyhow, I ended up getting sent there for 90 days. Or no, that was beforehand, excuse me. When I got locked up when I was 17 for the manufacturing, I ended up getting sent to Eastern Oregon Youth Correctional Facility in Burns, Oregon, which was a legit penitentiary. It's one of the worst penitentiaries I've ever been in my life. And they could keep you from the age of however young you were up to 26 years old. And there was adults in there. There was 20, 25-year-old people in there. And it was just chaotic, man, because you had these young kids that their frontal lobes weren't developed. They had no thought process. They didn't know what they were doing, and they were acting out all the time. And then you had these older kids that were antagonizing them and just stirring the pot every day. It was a pretty rough environment to be in. When I was in there for almost a year, I got out of there 5 days after my 18th birthday, and I got sent to an inpatient rehab, a 30-day inpatient rehab. And I made it through the 30 days. I don't know how, but I made it through the 30 days. And 2 hours later, I was high again. And I was up for about 2 weeks that time. And I ended up getting in a high-speed chase. We won't go into the details of that too much. But I ended up getting in a high-speed chase. I'm going to get all these chemicals for this guy that I was cooking meth with that had previously got arrested by the feds. And I pull into this one parking lot, and I see the guy pull in a car I didn't recognize. And I was like, whoa, that's Kevin. And so I back out and I start following him, like, what's going on? And he ends up taking off, like trying to get away from me. So I end up getting in this high-speed chase. And that was the first and only time I'd ever tried to commit suicide, because we had cops and everything else after us. And I hadn't been asleep since I just got out of the juvenile penitentiary. And so I was like, I ain't going back there. And we're outside of Caldwell, Idaho. And I ended up just jumping my car off this cliff at about 90 miles an hour. And it was 157 feet from where I left the ground to where my car impacted the ground again. And as this car is rolling down this hill, I hit the roof, like my whole body hit the roof of the car. And it was an old Ford Escort. So it was a 5-speed. And I remember I came down on the shifter in the middle of my back, and I remember thinking, like, why ain't I dead yet? And that's when everything started hurting. And so I scrambled out of the car and ran up the hill. And the only reason I know any of this is true is because when I got up to the hill, the cops and ambulances and everybody was there. And I had meth in my pocket, and I acted like I fell down and I hid it under a rock. And so I didn't get a charge for it or whatever, right? Well, later I went back to the spot and I got the meth out from underneath the rock. It was a really weird experience. And they just thought I was drunk, so I did the night in the drunk tank for that and got out and ended up doing 4 days in the county jail. And that didn't deter me at all. I still had the meth in my car that I went and got from the salvage yard and all that type of stuff. And so very soon I was high again, cooking meth again. And then I got out 7 months later, I got arrested again for manufacturing. And at this time I got raided at my mom's house. And it was kind of a weird scenario. I just called her, and that was one of my sleep days, right? So I'd been asleep for 3 or 4 days, and I woke up, and I'd called my mom, and I was like, hey, like, Tank, my Rottweiler was out of food. Can you bring some food home for him when you come home? And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I hung up. I got in the shower, and I'm just getting out of the shower, and all of a sudden, Mom's knocking on the bathroom door. It's like, this ain't good. there's some people out here that want to talk to you. And I go out into the living room. There had to have been 15 cops, sheriff, and all kinds of stuff. And I ended up getting hauled off again, and they found me with an entire lab that time. So I spent a bunch of time in the county for that and ended up pleading that down to something. I don't remember what I pled it down, but they made the mistake of sending me to a work release program. And so I get to the work release program and they send me home to go get my clothes. And I lived right on the Oregon-Idaho border. I just started walked right across the border into Idaho and was high again and started cooking meth and stuff like that again. I made it about 3 weeks that time without sleeping, got in another high-speed chase. And this time, I should have brought you the article. I still have it. I made the front page of the paper on this one.
We'll use it as the cover art.
I'll give it to you. But this time, like, they weren't playing around with Steven. There was 17 cops all together in the pursuit and an airplane chasing me until I finally ran out of gas. And then they ended up getting me, and I ended up going to the pen. And I got caught with a lab again that time. And that time, it ended up being a 95 count indictment. I was facing like decades in prison as a 19-year-old kid. And I still didn't care. Like we talked about earlier, my mentality and just my thought process was so twisted because every time I went to jail and I got out, I could see the way people treated me differently. And it just kept building street cred in my head, right? I just kept elevating myself when yet I was just digging my hole deeper. So by this time, though, when I got arrested in that high-speed chase, nobody wanted anything to do with me. People I thought were my friends and all these bikers and everybody else that I was hanging out with, they were tired of me. They didn't want to do to me. Most of them told on me. All of my own family was saying everything they knew about me. And so it ended up putting me in prison for 4 years in Oregon and 5 years in Idaho because I was living on the streets. So I was stealing cars in Idaho, super dumb. But I was stealing cars because I had nowhere to live. And so I was stealing cars off car lots and living in the cars and then also breaking into houses that were for sale. And that's where I would shower and stuff like that. So I'd stolen a lot of cars, like 15, 20 cars or something like that out of Idaho. And so because of all that, I ended up having all these grand theft auto charges. And so I ended up getting 60 months in Idaho. But luckily, my sentences ran concurrent. So I only had to serve one sentence altogether. Yeah. And that's what broke my meth addiction. That's what led me to prison.
Yeah. Man, there's so much I want to unpack here.
Yeah, dig in.
So just kind of going back to, man, when you first started meth, like being 14, 15, what was that like going to school? Like, how did you function as a child, as a kid at that point?
I was a terrible student. I didn't function, Brad. Not at all. If I was in class, it was nothing productive, and I was just making jokes and being the class clown or whatever else and just causing problems. But most of the time, I just rode the bus into town to skip school and go hang out with my friends and do drugs.
Yeah. And then diving back into the mindset of like when you first tried alcohol, what do you think it was that kind of drew you to that?
Just the fact I saw my dad do it every day.
Yeah.
That was the only reason I initially thought there was anything positive there was because I saw my dad drinking every day.
Yeah. But once you experience the feelings, kind of like an escape from this reality that you were living, that you were unhappy with, were you chasing that high?
I never thought about that actually with the alcohol. And it could have been an escape, but I think it was more the fulfillment, that temporary fulfillment or release from getting drunk. And now I'm not worried about anything. I'm not stressed out about anything or anything like that. I think that if I had to describe it, it would probably be that the fulfillment of just being able to forget about it. Why most people drink, right? Because they don't want to think about stuff, right? And so at that young age, just kind of being in a very tumultuous family and a very angry home, that was my way. And I'm also one of those types of people, and I haven't drank in over 10 years now, not for addiction reasons. I just don't drink. But when I'm in that stage or when I was drinking, I was the type of person that nobody would know I was drunk. Like you would think I was almost sober until all of a sudden it was very apparent it wasn't. When I just get very indifferent, nothing bothers me. I don't care about anything. But then there was also, if you flip that switch, I had a very violent side when I was drunk. So it was either happy-go-lucky, quiet Steven that didn't do anything, or you pissed him off and now we're all fighting.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I can relate to that. All right. So here you are, you're 19 years old and you're about to serve 5 years, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I'd been in the county for that because obviously I had a lot of charges and they wanted to give me a lot more time than that. So I was in the county jail for about a year fighting all those charges. And ironically, I never got to spend any good birthday on the streets. For 16, I was on house arrest.
Yeah.
18, I was locked up. And 21, I was locked up. But anyhow, so it's now I'm 20 and I'm in the prison intake center and I go through that whole thing. And I got sent to Oregon State Penitentiary for the first penitentiary that I went to. And I remember that first day when the doors closed. And I just remember standing there at the bars, and it was still bars and cables and all that stuff. And as we'd spoke about before, like when those doors closed that first time, I was like, I finally made it. Because in my head and my thought process was so twisted. Like now I just had more, now I was elevated. Now I just wasn't a criminal. Now I was a convict, right? Because when I got out, like now people are going to look at me different. And I thought that was cool. Like I thought that like I just graduated the university or something like that is how I looked at it. Yeah, exactly. And I had a very warped and twisted mindset towards that for about the first year and a half, 2 years that I was in prison. And like most people, all I did was run and lift weights and I didn't really cause trouble. I stayed out of trouble, but I hung around with a bunch of people that caused trouble because naturally you're in prison. There's nothing else to do but cause trouble in there. So I didn't have any jobs. I didn't do anything that I wasn't forced to besides exercise. And mind you, like I'm a high school dropout. I have no education. I can barely read. The first book that I ever read was after I went to prison. It was The Firm by John Grisham, and it took me like a month to read it. So like I'm basically illiterate and I don't know anything other than cooking meth and fighting at this stage. But anyhow, I'd met this cat, which I ended up becoming very good friends with Amos. His name was Amos Osborne. And when he was 16, him and some of his friends were doing acid and they were at this big party and had something to do with some girls. I don't know the exact story, but they ended up murdering these other two guys that were flirting with their girlfriends while they're on acid. So Amos was a lifer. He was never getting out of prison from the age of 16 until whenever he dies, if he's not dead already. And I've been in prison about a year and a half or so, something like that. And at this time I was forced to work in the chow hall. And so after all the meals, I had to go clean the chow hall, mop the floors and all that type of stuff. And the way it worked at OSP is on the weekends due to staffing. I think there was 4 blocks. Out of the 4 blocks, only 2 got to go out in the morning and then 2 got to go out in the afternoon. And mine happened to be the morning yard that day. And it was only like an hour and a half in the morning, but it was 3 hours in the afternoon and it flip-flopped Saturdays and Sundays. Well, I was in my block that afternoon. But when I got off the chow hall assignment, like I could go out and I either turned left to go back to the cages or you turned right to go out to the yard. And it was just a beautiful day. And I was like, I'm going to the yard. And so I ended up going out to the yard and I see Amos sitting on a bench. And so I walk over and I sat down and as soon as I sat down, like he looked at me with just a very angry look on his face. And he's, what are you doing out here? And I thought he was joking at first. I'm like, why are you acting like a cop? What's going on? What's wrong with you? And unbeknownst to me, I obviously caught him in a moment where he was like, I'm spending the rest of my life in here. And he felt really shitty about himself at the time. And he just ended up tearing into me about how he's never going to get out of prison. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. I'm young. I have the opportunity to change. I can go do this. I can go do that. But yet I don't do anything. I run around and do this and that and the other thing. Listen, you're not doing anything. You don't even have an education. And I just looked at him and regardless of whether I wanted to admit it or not, my soul knew he was right. And I got up and I walked into my cage and I started studying. And within a couple of months, I had my GED and I got a job and learned how to paint and all kinds of stuff like that. And that was actually like the transition point for me from being an addict actually into becoming like a productive member of society. That's where my thinking finally started to change about 2 years off.
Beautiful blessing is to have someone that's been through this life experience to kind of shift you to make sure you don't end up in issues.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it was. It was a beautiful blessing that I didn't realize. I just thought I had a friend that was being a jerk to me. And it wasn't until later that I looked back and realized the friend that he actually was, because that's what he was being.
Yeah. What was life like in prison? I mean, I know you said you went in with this mentality. Like, what was the day-to-day like? I mean, I'm sure it's got to be
boring, dude. So boring. Yeah. But then again, like it's boring. And it's just the same thing. You wake up at the same time. You go to get breakfast at the same time. You eat the same thing all the time. And I hate to say this, and I'm not encouraging anybody to go there, obviously, but I had a lot of fun in prison because it's a lawless environment, right? And I'm already in a cage. What are you going to do to me? Put me in a smaller cage? And so I didn't care. I did whatever I wanted. I avoided trouble as much as I possibly could. I didn't go looking for it. But if it was, and I had a lot of fun. I don't know how else to describe that because, and I know it's weird to say that, right? Who could say they went to prison and had fun? And don't get me wrong, it was very depressing. Like, it was very lonely, all the solitude and just being trapped in a box. But because I'd been getting locked up since I was 15, you just learn to put your mind where your body's at. Like a lot of with you, like with training, it's very uncomfortable. It sucks, right? But as long as you can lock your mind into what you're actually doing, then you can endure it. Right. And prison isn't any different. As soon as you put your mind where your body's at and you get rid of all those external thoughts, then it is what it is.
Yeah. That's got to be the challenge of like, where do you find hope? You know, listen, you're in there for 5 years or 4 years, whatever long it was. Like, where do you find hope to wake up every day and just want to continue?
Yeah, I don't think I had any hope when I was in prison, to be honest with you. Yeah. And I wasn't one of those people that counted the days or anything like that. And some people did. They would mark it on their calendars and all that. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, like I was on level 4 and 5 yards. Like I didn't know if I was actually ever going to get out. Like I've seen tons of people murdered and stabbed and all that prison stuff. And so, yeah, I'm here and I have an exit date, but am I actually going to make it to that exit date? None of us really know. And so you just take it day by day. Yeah. And so I wouldn't honestly say there was much hope. The only satisfaction I ever probably actually got in prison was getting my GED. Yeah. And besides that, it was just serving time.
Yeah. Yeah. You said like you saw a lot of violence and stuff like that. It's like, how do you navigate that every day of like having your head on, not knowing, like,
it makes you very untrusting. And even still to this day, 23 years later now, it's been since I've gotten out, I'm a very untrusting person. I always consciously watch who's around me. If I'm at a restaurant, like I have to have the table that faces the door at the back of the room. I don't like having my back to people. And it's all of those little things because you can't trust people. And usually when somebody's going to do something to you, it's somebody you know. Yeah. So you can't. And so you have to live like that. I mean, I've seen a lot of violence. I've seen some unspeakable things. I did end up getting in a couple altercations, and probably the worst one was after I'd interstate compact. And this is about the time I told you my testimony where I met Sam. I'd reconnected with Sam, but I'd interstate compacted to Idaho right quickly after I'd went to prison in Oregon to get my sentences running concurrent. Well, I just got back to Oregon and they'd shipped me to a new penitentiary in Umatilla called Two Rivers Correctional Facility, which was awful, man. It was a terrible place to be. Well, I'd got put on this pod with this guy, Sam Ragsdale, that I'd met a couple of years earlier than that, coming in the prison intake center. We rode the chain up together, and that's where I'd met him. And unbeknownst to me at the time, Sam was a career criminal. He was back to prison for his third time. But unbeknownst to me, he was a leader of a group called, or one of the shot callers of a group called European Kindred. It's a white prison gang on the West Coast. And I had no clue. I didn't know that when I met him because I was green to the whole prison system. But I'd ended up reconnecting with Sam. We were on the unit and there was this native guy. His name was Kermit. I don't know what his actual name was. Everybody called him Kermit. And the rumor was he had AIDS. I don't know if he did or not. But he was in prison for the Charleston murders, I think, in Oregon. He'd murdered like 7 people or something like that. Well, he had another friend, and I have no clue what his name was, but this guy had just gotten out of the SHU, and they put him back on the unit. And I was sitting at not a permanent table because everybody has assigned seating for chow and all that type of stuff. You just don't go sit where you want. When I was sitting at like the mixed table for people because I just got on the unit that don't have a permanent seat yet. Well, the only other table was like the rapo table where all the child molesters and all that stuff are. Well, this new native gets out of the SHU and he comes into the unit. And so me being a new guy with nobody knowing who I am, they try to kick me out of the mixed table over to the other one. I was like, absolutely not. Like, it might be a middle seat, but you ain't taking anything from me. Well, now the next thing I know, this guy Kermit wants to stab me. And I didn't know this at the time. Sam ends up telling me later, but we end up going out on the yard after dinner. And it was weird, and I didn't know any of this was going on. I walk out on the yard, and when I say yard, it was 40-foot concrete walls and maybe a half an acre of grass area. Like, you couldn't see anything. It was a modular prison. But we go out, I'm going out to do whatever I'm going out to do, and there's probably 30 people out there. And I instantly walked outside, and I was like, something's up. What's going on out here? Little did I know it was me. But then this whole altercation starts with this guy, Kermit, asking me if I'm clicking up and all this. And basically he's pissed because I'm not giving up my seat for his buddy, right? So then the buddy just comes up and blindsides me, and I end up in a fist fight with this dude. And we fight for a while or whatever, and we get done and we shake hands and we both go our separate ways. And then the next day, Kermit comes up and he's telling me, I was going to stab you and this and that and the other thing. And Sam's like, yeah, I basically helped you out of that one. And it was all over a seat, right? Like all over a friggin' seat at a metal table. But that's just the way it was. As far as I know, that was probably the closest I ever came to having anything serious happen to me besides just fist fights and things like that.
Yeah. That's crazy. I can imagine like having to have your head on a swivel at all times, figuring out who you're trying to find your alliances to, who you can trust.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is you really can't trust any of them. Right. You can trust them in the moment. And I'm just, I guess, lucky that I'd met Sam and we connected and he knew who I was, or I probably would have ended up dead that day.
So what was it like, coming off the addiction? Did you have to go through severe withdrawals?
Yeah, that was awful, dude. Because I was on meth for so long that it took about, I would say, close to a year of being incarcerated. Because you get wicked, a New England word there, right? You get very bad bouts of just emptiness. I don't know how else to describe it. You just feel worthless and empty. And you can be completely fine 1 second, and then the next second you're just completely empty and depressed, and you feel hollow and nothing else matters. And you'd go through these cycles, and it's obviously worse when you first come off of meth. Mm-hmm. And knowing more about addiction and things like that now, it's basically your lack of serotonin and your dopamine and all that, right? Because the meth spikes all that, and that's what gets you high. But then your body has to learn to re-regulate that stuff. And so it'd be those dopamine and serotonin crashes and things like that. And they're awful, man. They were awful. And it took about a year until I finally didn't have to experience any of those anymore.
Any like suicidal thoughts and stuff that came out through that where you're in? Because I know you mentioned that one time that you dropped the car off. But.
I did. No. Like I've never been a suicidal person. It was only that one time. But no, never when I was in prison did I ever think about hanging it up. And I probably, back to the car thing, like I've often wondered like what propelled me to jump my car off a 157-foot cliff. I don't know to this day, other than I didn't want to go back to jail.
Right.
That was it.
Probably not so much of a suicide thing. Like
no, it wasn't that I don't want to live anymore. It's just like, I'm not going back to jail. Right. And that's all it was. So like everybody, I've gotten depressed and things like that, but I've never been suicidal. Like some people like seriously deal with that.
I know we talked about when you're in prison that time, that's when you finally found God.
Yeah. So it was right after the thing with Kermit, actually. And it was, so we'll just say that thing happened on a Wednesday, right? It was that next Sunday, sitting playing cards or watching TV or whatever in the day room. And Sam came up, and it was on a Sunday, and he's, hey, you want to go to church? And my only thought in my head was, yeah, I'll get out of the cage for a while. And it had nothing to do with God. It had nothing to do with church, because my family didn't go to church. I might have went once or twice when I was a kid with a friend on a sleepover or something, but I didn't go to church. I just wanted to get out of the unit. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go to church. And so we go, and I couldn't tell you anything that the pastor talked about during that hour or anything. I just remember at the end of it, he said that the next Sunday he was going to come back and do baptisms. And that was the first time I ever, knowing what it is now, that was the first time I ever felt the Holy Spirit. I felt it touch me, just being like, you need to do this. So I put my name on the list, and the next weekend I went back and I got baptized. And again, not knowing at the time, but that's where my addiction to meth stopped 100%. Looking back now, I never thought about cooking meth again after that. I never craved meth after that. I never had any desire to have anything to do with it again after that day. And then again, like I wasn't a regular churchgoer after that either. It was just, I felt that urge to get baptized, and that's where the Lord planted his seed.
Yeah. He freed you from that one stronghold.
But just in that simple expression of my faith towards him, with not even knowing what I was doing. I didn't know what baptism meant. I had no clue.
So how far into your sentence were you happened?
About 2 years. Yeah, so I still had another 2. I got out at 48, just under 48 months. So I had another 2 to go after that.
Yeah. And what was the rest of that?
It went by pretty quickly, actually. I never got in any more, I can't say that. I never had any more real physical altercations after that. I just worked. I ended up getting shipped back to Oregon State Penitentiary after that. And I ended up getting my painting job back, and I just worked, man. And that was it. That's all I did, worked and worked out and tried to figure out what I wanted to do when I got out. And ironically, like I'm a retired helicopter pilot now, but even then I would write flight schools from prison, like wanting to fly airplanes and stuff like that. Cause my dad was a private pilot when I was a kid.
Okay.
So I took my first ride in a Champ, it's like a Piper Cub type thing.
Yeah.
When I was like five or six or something. And so I'd always had that desire to go fly and be an aviator or whatever. And so I'd write flight schools, and I never got any letters back or anything like that.
Yeah.
Which I couldn't imagine now after running a flight school, being in them. I couldn't imagine getting a letter from an inmate being like, hey, I want to do this when I get out in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But that was kind of that. Like I'd kind of shifted my focus more towards the future. And now actually, what am I going to do when I get out of here versus what am I going to do while I'm in here? And so I guess, going back to your question about hope, I don't know if I would call it hope, but at least I had forward thought then versus just living in the day.
Yeah. So where did things lead once you got out?
So I knew very quickly, well, not very quickly, but as I approached the end of my sentence, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go back to where I was at in Oregon. And so I'd ended up reconnecting with my dad actually in a prison visiting room. I hadn't seen him for 10 years. But where I was at in Umatilla, he lived just a few miles down the road. So he used to come and visit me. And I ended up calling him and I was like, hey, what do you think about me coming to live with you in Montana? And because his whole family's here, I have a huge family here. And so I was actually able to interstate compact to here. He got me a job doing construction. I started building houses, and I still had no clue what I wanted to do. But at least it was like a fresh slate in a clean environment for the most part, right? I wasn't around anybody doing drugs. I didn't have any of the same triggers or the friends or nothing like that. And so I could create a new Steven, essentially. Nobody knew my past. The only people that knew were my family and my parole officer that I had to go check in with. Besides that, I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I framed for a few years until 2004. I was working up in Iron Horse. I was framing up there, and I fell off the peak of a 30-foot roof. I came flying off that and hit the ground and ended up getting all banged up. I was on work comp for a couple of years, and that was probably the most depressed I've ever been in my life because I ended up having shoulder surgery. I'd cracked some ribs and all kinds of stuff, messed up my back. I was in a bad shape for quite a while. And that's when I got introduced to aviation again, actually being in an aircraft. When it was during that interim there, a friend of mine had just gotten his private pilots over here at the local airport. And he just hit me up one afternoon and said, hey, you want to go for a helicopter ride? And I was like, absolutely. And as soon as he pulled into a hover, I was like, I have to do this. This is cool. And so that's what sparked my desire to now get back into aviation and go and pursue all that type of stuff. And so because of my fall and through Voc Rehab, I was actually blessed enough to get scholarships from the state of Montana. It took me 3 years of going through all that to be able to get them. But I got scholarships from the state of Montana, and that's what sent me through flight school.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. How old were you at this point? 20.
I was 28 then. When I started flight school, I was 29 because it took a couple years to get everything figured out. So I was 29 when I started flight school. I finished when I was right before I turned 31, right at 31, right there. I screwed off quite a bit because I went to Boston. So I was over in North Andover flying over there.
Okay.
And it was just a whole new experience to me, right? And so between getting out, I ended up going to church here in the valley, just down the road. It used to be New Covenant. It's Hope Church now. But I went there for years and ushered and really got involved in Celebrate Recovery and that type of stuff. And I got really into Jesus and really into pursuing that part of my life and just figuring out my faith and who is God and what is God and where is God and how does God fit into my life type thing. But then when I went off to Boston, it was a whole new environment and a big city and tons of people. And I put God in my back pocket again. And I didn't read a Bible for years. And I just got into the nightlife and flying. And like I said before, going through flight school, my ego got very inflated. I just thought I was the coolest person on the planet, especially after I got my flight instructor certificate and I started teaching people how to fly and things like that. I just became very arrogant and very egotistical. And it wasn't like I was a jerk to people. I thought I was better than everybody else because I was this person and now I'm this person. And the ironic thing is nobody knew my past or where I came from or nothing like that. And so that, I think, made it even worse because nobody knew. And in my head, I won't say his name, but I ended up flying with a correctional officer once. And man, he was pretty cool guy actually, but he flew a lot of hours that he really didn't need to. Just because in my head I was like, now I can finally get back at one of these guys, right?
Torturing him.
Right. And being a flight instructor, that's the whole thing is you're
Right.
just building up your hours to go out and get in a turbine and go out into the commercial industry. And so I was like, all right, let's see how many hours we can get out of this guy. And like, wait, he was cool. He was a captain. And like, I actually had a lot of fun flying with him. But I just remembered all the COs that did dirty things to me. And I thought, no, we're going another hour today.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's so I went and did that. Then I got back into drinking, actually, and a little bit of drug use, actually, once I got back into Boston with some weed and things like that. Never bet meth or anything like that again. But I started smoking weed about the same time when I was 13, 14. And I enjoy smoking weed. I'd rather smoke weed or drink or anything else, or versus drink or anything else like that. So I got involved in the medical cannabis industry up in Maine. And so I got pretty far off into that again, doing some things that I probably shouldn't have done. And it's all part of the story now, but I never got in trouble for anything or anything like that because I obviously wasn't doing the same types of things. It was more consumption and just learning how to cultivate. And I was actually through that process, I was actually able to help a couple people with cancer that had cancer that took no actual traditional Western treatment, just used cannabis oil and are cancer free now still today.
Yeah.
So I was able to experience that. And I learned how to be a productive member of society, if that makes sense. A lot of that you don't know how, right? I don't think people understand the transition of coming from a street kid, literally, because I lived on the streets from 16 to 19, going from that into the penitentiary and then getting out. Like you have a completely different outlook on life than everybody around you. Like I didn't experience graduations and homecomings and proms and all that type of stuff. I got jail and rehab centers. Yeah. And so when I got to New England, going through that process of flight school, I really got to learn how to experience life, if that makes sense, and take life for the beauty that it is, right? Being able to just go to the beach or go wherever else or go see some of the historic sites and accept those for what they were instead of looking at it as an opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talk about, going through this whole phase of what were relationships like? Because I know that you said, you kind of had this lustful desire.
Yeah.
So you were chasing women. Was there any relationships through all that, or was it all just kind of
it was one after another, to be honest with you. My whole life until I met my former wife was just one relationship with another. And with the lust starting very young as well, I didn't know. I thought sex was love. And so that's all I looked for, right? I didn't look to connect on an intimate, emotional level. I looked to have sex. And once I got that, I was just off to the next one, right? And so I had a lot of relationships, but I didn't have any actual relationship, if that makes sense. I just had women around to have sex with them. Yeah. And obviously in a big city, it's much easier to do that. And so I went through that and not only just in the city, but even when I was a teenager and being a drug addict, like that same environment, it was the same thing. And on the other aspect of that, the women are going through the same thing on that too, right?
They're dealing with their own stuff, and they're going for sex to feel validated and feel worthy. And
yep. And they're not only that, but they're getting passed around and handed around and all kinds of different things like that. And I didn't understand any of that when I was a kid. I didn't understand it until within the last 5 or 6 years when I've actually started working on myself and doing the work that most people don't want to do because it's hard, right? And so, yeah, I can't honestly say I ever really had a true relationship until I met my ex-wife. And I think that the reason her and I were able to have the relationship that we did, which we're not together anymore, and that's not her fault or my fault. It just is what it is. It didn't work out. I mean, we still hang out. We still talk. We're still friends. But the one thing that I can say about that woman is I did have a relationship with her. I could sit all day long and have conversation with her without neither one of us looking at our phones or anything like that. We could just talk. And we were able to share struggles in our life and things like I told you, I'm not going to dive into her stuff because that's not my place, but she had a very rough childhood as well, a very traumatic childhood. She moved 47 times in just the 12 years of school. And so she was always on the go and she didn't have anything stable when she was young. And so it was like those two broken vessels meeting.
Trauma bonding.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it was. And I didn't even know what that was until a few years ago. But that's exactly what it was, is it was a trauma bond. And I complimented her traumas and she complimented my traumas. And we fought, we argued, we had sex, we did whatever else. But at the end of the day, we accepted each other for who we were. And that was the first, and we were together for 13 years. And that was the first real relationship I could honestly say I've ever had. And I think we got together when I was 34, 32.
Yeah, so that's how you guys met.
Yeah. So actually, ironically, I met her friend in traffic on 28 in Salem. It was at a stoplight. This Puerto Rican chick, hey, take my number. And she ended up being my ex-wife's co-worker.
Yeah.
And so that's how I met her. But she was also, you know where the airport is in Lawrence?
Yeah.
The storage units as you drive through there. Well, she managed those and a bunch of hangars and stuff like that. So I literally had to drive by her office every single day. Yeah. And so it started out, we were just friends. We would hang out, we would have lunch and whatever. And she was married at the time. Well, then she ends up getting divorced and we're still hanging out. And it just worked out that we ended up being together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you meet her? You said you met her in Boston, right?
I did, yeah. So she lived in North Andover. I lived in North Andover, and she managed, like I said, the storage facility and some of the hangars and some of the properties for the owner. And at first, we just hung out. And she was in a previous marriage. And so when we actually started dating, she had kids from a previous marriage, right? And so now not only am I dating somebody, I'm also having to put up with kids. And not ever having kids and not really being nurtured as a kid, but being a step kid, I didn't know how to take all that. Like, it was really weird at first. And the oldest daughter, she did not like me. And she did not like me at all. She didn't want me to be around. And understandably so, right? Yeah. She went through a bunch of stuff. I wasn't her dad. And there was some new guy in the house, right? But the youngest two were 2 and 4. And their dad was an addict as well, and he had completely disappeared and wasn't in their life. So I really absorbed those two as my own kids. And like, I taught them how to read and ride their bikes and like all the things, right? Went to all their sports stuff and all that stuff. All the stuff that I never got, I went and did for them. And ended up having a pretty good relationship. We still talk and stuff like that today, even though my stepdaughter, actually, she's really cute. She told my ex-wife like a year or so ago that even if we weren't going to talk anymore, me and my ex-wife, that she was still going to have her relationship. It is. And she was like 16 or something.
Yeah.
But like, I'm basically the only dad that she's ever known. I mean, she knows her dad, but he's just never really been involved in her life.
Yeah.
So yeah, we ended up, and we met right before I finished flight school. And then I'd taken off, went on vacation for 3 months. And it wasn't until I came back in the spring of 2012, like March of 2012, is when we actually started dating. And then about a year later, I moved in with her. No, a year and a half, something like that. I ended up moving in with her, which was another shift for me, right? Because I didn't move to Boston to live in Boston. I moved there for the experience in flight school and then go off into the commercial world and do my thing. But now I'm stuck in this situation where I love this lady and she has kids from a previous marriage and she can't leave. And so now all of a sudden I get stuck. Which in the end wasn't a bad thing. I had a great career. I did a lot of stuff. Ended up working my way up from just the student at the flight school to being a chief pilot at the flight school. I did that to the end of 2014. And then from there, I ended up going off to New York and flying charters and tours and all that type of stuff. And then came back to Boston and flew the news for both WCVB and Fox 25. Flew each one for about a year. And then from there, it was right around when COVID started. After everything had added up. And that's when I ended up coming home. And when she moved, everybody moved. We moved, all moved back here at the end of 2021. And I ended up taking a job, the last job I did, flying for Timberline helicopters up in Sandpoint, flying Blackhawks, doing ski lift construction and logging and stuff like that. Yeah, it was actually cool. It's a very demanding job because you live with the aircraft, you travel with the aircraft, and you don't sleep in the same place twice. And it's long days and all that. But I've seen some of the most beautiful places on earth. They're really beautiful places at that job specifically.
So what brought the end of flying?
Actually, it was kind of two things. One, the wife didn't transition well to here, and I can't blame her because I was flying, and so I'm gone for 2-3 weeks at a time, home for a week or two, gone 2-3 weeks at a time. So we all move here. I'm here for a week, and then I got to go fly as her and the kids are trying to settle into a new place where they don't know anybody and getting in school and jobs and the whole thing. It ended up being too much for her. It ended up causing us to fight a lot, and that's what ultimately caused our divorce. And that's kind of what caused the end of my flying career as well. And it's funny that you say that because when I was in flight school, I used to have this flight instructor that said pilots suffer from AIDS, aviation-induced divorce syndrome. And it was just a joke that was always said to the flight school, and now I suffer from it as well, right? And so I just got really bitter towards it, and I just didn't want to do it anymore because I looked at it as, which it's not, but in a way I correlated it with that's how I lost my family from being gone all the time. And I was just tired of traveling too.
Yeah.
Because except for when I was at the flight school and then working for the news, you have to be a nomad as a pilot. It's very hard to find a job where you actually want to live. You have to live where the jobs are. And I don't want to travel anymore. I don't want to freaking live out of a suitcase and be on the road.
Yeah. So how challenging was that? All of a sudden here you are, you're divorced. So you're going through that pain.
Dude, it was extremely challenging. It was probably one of the lowest points in my life. I ended up living in my cargo trailer, a little 6x12 cargo trailer for 7 months. And I just had a little plug-in and a little heater, no lights, nothing like that. But looking back, it was extremely simple. But I just parked it in a friend's side yard. When I lived in my cargo trailer, just me and my dog for 6 or 7 months until winter came. And I ended up getting back into doing tile because before flight school, I framed and all that. After I fell off the roof, I got into doing tile specifically, and I did that for a while. So I got back into doing that, and I tiled again and did stuff like that. And it was just kind of a transition. That was a very depressing and lonely part of life because I had no direction. I knew I didn't want to fly anymore. I didn't like doing construction and tile, and I didn't know where I wanted to go, or which we talked about. I'm still kind of in that season of what's next. And so it was lonely.
How did you navigate that? Did you turn to any vices?
Women, obviously. And that was it. I've never really, once I was baptized that initial time, I've never really had a problem with addiction. I've never turned back to drugs for stuff. I mean, I've smoked weed or whatever, but I don't turn to it as a vice, if that makes sense. It's more of just in the moment or amusement or something like that. And I don't do it all the time or whatever, but I would just turn to women, man, just random women and getting back to that original addiction of lust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is something that I avoid now. Within the last 7-8 months, I just avoid it. I have girls hit me up all the time and I just ignore them because at the end of the day, I'm only making the hole bigger. That's all I'm doing. Yeah. But if I wouldn't have went through that lonely period and that time of living in my cargo trailer and really diving into the self-reflection, which ultimately led me to getting trauma counselors and all types of stuff like that to figure out what's actually going on in here, right? If I wouldn't have went through that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I would still be chasing and pursuing that empty hole and trying to fill it. Yeah. And I don't even know if it's validation. I don't even know if it's that. I think it's literally just trying to shovel the hole full. Because I've thought about that, and it's not, I don't care about the validation as much as that, because no woman's ever going to validate me as much as like I felt as signing my first flight student off or things like that. Like those accomplishments and those achievements mean more and have satisfied me more than any sexual relationship that I've ever had. It's literally like when I'm with a woman, it's like I'm shoveling into that hole, if that makes sense. And I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like I have that big empty hole inside of me I do not know how to fill.
Yeah. Speaking of that hole, where's your walk with faith been at this point? 'Cause I know, I mean, and most people, if you guys don't know, the Northeast, Massachusetts is the number 3 least religious state.
I did not know that.
Vermont is number 1.
Maine
is number 2. And Massachusetts is number 3 as far as the least religious. So the Northeast is the least God-fearing area in this country. So
that makes sense, especially those 3 states.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, actually, since then, my walk with Christ has gotten much better, gotten back into scripture. And at first I got, like I said before, I was really involved with Celebrate Recovery. And I just felt familiar with that. And so I got back involved with that right when the divorce was starting as just a way to release, right? To be able to go to a place and just talk and explain what's going on with me and get a sounding board from somebody else as well, right? That's where I was talking about. I think I mentioned it where the man had said that sex isn't love after his fourth wife. It was in one of those groups where I heard that. And so that was my initial kick to get back into it. But I don't go to church. I do a lot of audio Bible and I do a lot of YouTube church. And I do a lot of 2918 church, the guy out of Atlanta, David. Or Philip. Yeah.
He's amazing.
I love that guy. Like he's real.
He is convicted.
100%. Dude, and he's a
honest,
real person. Like,
talking about prostitution and everything. Yeah.
Dude, like I can relate to somebody like that.
Right.
And so I do a lot of Philip Anthony Mitchell.
Yep.
And then I can't think of the other name right now. But David Wilkerson started it. He also started Teen Challenge and all that. And then the second pastor there was Carter Conlon. And that's when I got involved with it. Times Square Church in New York is what it is. And then now Carter's retired as well. But I do a lot of their sermons and like a lot of YouTube sermons with them, even the old ones with Dave. And I just feel like I don't know if it's a better connection. I just feel more satisfied, like being in the comfort of my own home and actually listening and studying versus being in a congregation of people. Right. And I know that's not what scripture teaches us. Right. Like we are supposed to connect with the body of Christ, right? And that's what we're supposed to do. And I know I need to do that. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. And we talked about that because I know you mentioned like joining men's groups and things like that to create community.
Yeah.
Because that's really the most important thing is about creating community.
Right.
We're hearing God's word and things like that, but like we also need to lean on each other and help lift each other up and create that community and talk about God and be around Christ-centered people to, really get fulfillment.
Exactly. Because that's where we actually learn from.
Yeah.
Like we don't learn by watching sermons and feeling all butterfly and stuff like that. We learn from sharing our experiences with people, from somebody else that's been there that can give us their perspective or just an outside perspective of what we're going through.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's the community that actually matters. And no, it's actually been weighing on me. Yeah. It's like the Lord's convicted me on it. So you need to actually get back into something. Like, what are you doing? Because it's required.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
If we're going to walk this walk and we want to call ourselves Christians, then we need to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't have an excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll invite you to church on Sunday then.
Yeah, I'll go.
There you go.
For
just
sure.
put a foot in the door. We'll just go from there.
Yeah, I'll check out Fresh Life.
Yeah. So now let's talk into kind of this new season of your life. So you walked away from flying, and I know that you kind of got in some real estate investment type stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you're at and kind of this season you're at right now in life. Dive into that because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So I ended up, after getting out of the flying thing, I always had a desire to do real estate from mid 30s, I would say. I used to watch a lot of YouTube of the guy, Jerry Norton. He wholesales houses. And I used to that was my thing. I don't watch TV. I'm a YouTuber. And so I would watch a lot of his YouTube stuff. And so right after I quit flying, I ended up getting into real estate kind of fortuitously. It was a lady at the south end of town here that I knew. And I was going through the divorce. It was while I was living in the cargo trailer type thing. And she's like, hey, I'm moving to Libby. I want to sell my house. Do you want to buy it? And I was like, yeah, would love to buy it. And she sold it to me on creative financing and like all the things that these people go pay to learn. This lady just did it for me, right? But I was going through the divorce at the same time. And so we're a couple weeks out from closing and my lawyer's like, you can't buy that house. If you buy that house, you're going to have to sell it. And I'm just like, no, I'm living in a cargo trailer. And she's like, I don't care. You need to go rent something. You can't buy that house. And so I ended up wholesaling the house and ended up making like $60,000 on it. And I was just like, oh my God, there's so much money to be made here. And that was so easy. It was so simple, right? So then I ended up buying all the courses and doing all the things, right? And going through all the motions to learn all this type of stuff. And I made a good deal of money in wholesaling houses and doing that. But then I got introduced into real estate funds, which I don't know if most people know, but you can go out and you can pool people's money together and you can go out and buy things with them. And it's completely legal. And for real estate, you don't need any licenses. You can go out and raise $150 million with no licenses. And I mean, you have to have lawyers draw up the paperwork and all that. Like it needs to be legal, but you can go out and raise a ton of money and then go invest other people's money in houses. And so that sent me through this wholesale journey. That sent me on this little path of creating a real estate fund. And I spent a significant amount of money creating this real estate fund. with the objective. And it was my birthday, actually. It was what made me pick Section 8. It was my birthday a couple of years ago. And ironically, I had to wake up early, and it was like 6 something in the morning, and I'm at the post office, and there was this homeless lady walking out of the post office. And as I'm going in, and I was just, man, that lady was sleeping in here. She probably thought I was going to kick her out or whatever else, right? And in my head, I just remembered all the homeless nights I slept in bushes or broke into people's garages, because I've been there. And so, and it just put something on me. I was like, Lord, how do I help those people? Is there a way that I can help those people? And so then I was like, oh, let's go do Section 8 housing. And so then I spent months, man, almost a year, and about $50,000 building this real estate fund to go out and buy rent-ready houses and fill them with Section 8 tenants, starting in the Southwest or the Midwest, St. Louis area, and then kind of following the Mississippi Delta downwards, the poorest communities, which also has the highest fair market rents. And I was just getting ready to launch the fund when I ended up going on another podcast that I was talking to you about. When, as I said, it derailed me. And now after talking to you about it, it might not have derailed me. It might have pushed me where I need to go. But I ended up just not doing it. I ended up just putting everything on pause, and I ended up just kind of letting it linger there, because I didn't feel I was doing it for the right reason. At the end of the day, it all started out because I saw a homeless lady walking out of the post office. But every time that I worked on the fund, or every time I did it, it's how much money can I make? How much am I going to make off of this? And that's not why I want to do it. I don't want to do it to make millions of dollars. Yes, there's millions of dollars to be made there, but my heart wasn't in the right place. It really wasn't about helping other people. It was about, how can Stephen live extremely comfortably for the rest of his life with the minimal amount of work, right, is what it boiled down to. And I didn't do it because I don't feel good about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenging reality to face, that, hey, this started out with good intentions.
Yeah.
But then realizing it was the chase of earthly
selfishness,
wealth
man. 100% selfishness.
And I think so many people, they have good intentions. Like, I know people that do like sober homes and things like that. Yeah. And it's like, they have good intentions. Then they realize, shit, how much money I can make.
Yep.
And it's like, great, you can make money off it. But like, how are you going to use that money to make an impact in the kingdom? Yeah. Be extremely generous, while you're doing that. But when you start seeing your heart posture is, no, I just want the money, and I just want to chill.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened to me, Brad, is it started out with a good intention because of something I saw. And then obviously you have to go through all the financial aspect of it, and you have to frame it out, and you have to pencil all this out. And once I saw how much money was actually there to be made, like, it consumed me. Yeah. And that's all I thought about. I didn't think about the homeless person that I was going to put in that house anymore. I thought about, is this person going to be a good tenant so I get my money every month?
Right.
And that's an aspect of it, right? Like, it has to be an aspect of it. Right. And there's nothing wrong with making money, but my heart was not in the right place at the end when I was getting ready to have the lawyers draft up everything. So I was just, we're not doing this right now.
Yeah. Because I know when you walked in the house, pre-recording conversation was, man, I've just been drifting. I have no drive. I feel like I'm lost. And you told me that, I'm like, I think God saved you.
Yeah.
I think he's waiting for you to find purpose.
That's quite possible, because ever since then I have been drifting. And it's, man, like we talked about, it's not that I just don't have a desire to do anything, because everything that I did before was very selfish, and it was for my own personal gain and money, essentially. Right. And that's not, I don't want to be about that. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to live my life like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like I said before, I would give it all back to know that one person doesn't have to go through what I went through. That would mean more to me than $1 million in the bank, right, because I'm not taking that $1 million in the bank, but yet I'm going to see that other person in the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
And that means more to me than anything else. And so I am drifting, and I'm just in that season to where it's like, all right, God, what are you going to do with me? I'm sitting here until you take my hand like a little child, and you tell me exactly what to do step by step. Yeah. And if I miss a step, take me back to the other one.
Right.
Right. And that's just where I'm at with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's scary, man. It's super scary because I'm living off investments, and I still wholesale a little bit, but even that, I've lost desire to do that because it's all money driven. Right. And then, but there's aspects of it or not, right? Like general wholesale is you're just finding distressed houses, people that are distressed, right? They're in a problem, and you're essentially getting them to sell you your house at a discount so you can mark it up and sell it to somebody else. And I'm sorry, but that bothers me.
Taking advantage of a rough situation.
Right.
It's hard.
Right. It is. And it's not necessarily inherently bad.
No.
And there is a lot of people that do it, and there is an ethical way to do it, but it bothers me. And then there's like the foreclosure aspect of it, right? I know people that do strictly foreclosures,
Yeah.
and those people are going to lose their house anyway. And so I think that is a little bit better,
Right.
but I just can't do foreclosures, man. I can't. They're very hard to do because people aren't honest, and they got themselves in that situation for a reason. And some people are legitimately there because they lost their job or would have had a death or something like that. But most of those people, and I hate to say that, are scumbags, and they're playing the system. A lot of them now are the people that got the COVID forbearances, and they just didn't pay their rent for years or their mortgages for years. And they just expect to keep kicking that can down the road. And the last foreclosure I did was I don't remember where it was at, in the Midwest. But this lady, I'd worked with her for a month trying to get her out of this foreclosure. And she had 3 houses on all this same lot. She lived in one. She rented the other duplex out and made money on it. And then she ran a daycare out of the other one. And she just quit paying her mortgage because she thought that the government wasn't going to come for their money or whatever. I don't know what the hell this lady was thinking. But finally, then it wasn't months. It was maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But finally, we get to the end of that. And like, we're a couple days away from this foreclosure auction. And I was like, man, what are you guys going to do? Like, where are you guys going to go in a couple of days? You're going to get evicted if we don't get this figured out. She goes, what do you mean? What? Like, it didn't dawn on her that this can ain't getting kicked any farther down the road. She's at the end of her line. And it just dawned on me. It's like, these people are just taking advantage of the system. And it disgusted me. And I haven't worked at foreclosure since. And I don't want to because of those people. And I don't want to be part of that. Money's not worth it. And so I'm just in this season of waiting, like, what's next?
Yeah. And we talked about previously, because I went through that waiting season of like opportunities popping up and nothing felt right. Everything felt empty and shallow. And I felt like there was a bigger calling and a bigger purpose, no matter like how great of opportunities showed up. I feel like God's working through you in that season. And there's some things internally that he's trying to work through you. Yeah. So that way, when he does give you what's next, that you're able to steward that in right. And I truly feel like he has a calling on your life to make impact because of the story.
And I hope so. I really do. Because at the end of the day, my story is not for me. Right. And it took me a long time to realize that. And I've always been very ashamed of it. But I don't feel that I should be ashamed of it. I should be ashamed of it if I didn't make it out and I was still that person. Right. But I did. And I'm very fortunate to have the opportunities to be the person I am today, because most people can't go through. I think when I got out of prison, it was 12% of people with meth addictions actually made it out of there. And the rest either died incarcerated or on the streets in their active addiction. So I'm very blessed. And not only that, to be able to come from an addict and living on the streets and doing all the crazy criminal things I did, to then being able to go and get scholarships and fly aircraft and fly Wall Street bankers around. Like, not very many people can say that they did that. Right. And I was blessed with that. And that means something to me. And there's got to be a reason that the Lord did that. He didn't do that to just make me happy. He did that to build something for him. Yeah. And so I'm waiting. Yeah. I'm just waiting.
That's surrender. That's surrender. Okay. Like, so just, I need you to show me exactly where to go. Cause like, I've had those questions of, I don't want to do things on my own. I don't want it to be my own ideas, my own life. I did that and it was empty.
Right.
Yeah. It brought success and all that stuff, but it was empty.
Yeah.
You know, like, I want what you want from me, and I'm willing to surrender and wait until you show me exactly where it is.
Exactly. And like I just talked about success, I've learned now that worldly success means nothing. It doesn't matter if they write your name in stone and people read it 100 years away or later. It doesn't mean anything unless you're truly helping somebody, right? And like, people quote Marcus Aurelius all the time. Why do they quote him? Because he used his success to better people. He didn't use it in a way to gain worldly things. He shared his wisdom of his experiences in order for other people to learn and better themselves, right? And most people aren't like that now. Most people want to take their experiences and their success and use it to inflate their ego. And I can't be that person. I'm at that impasse. It's where I can't do it. It's my hypocrisy only goes so far. Yeah. It's interesting, man. And back to the flying thing, like the opportunities you mentioned, it made me remember this last February, like my dream job when I first started flying was the alert job. I wanted to fly that alert helicopter so bad. And I have a ton of time on that's a 407. I have a ton of time in that airframe and it's fun. It's my favorite airframe to fly. It's fast. It's just a really fun helicopter. And that pilot job has been open for months and I won't even apply for it. It's nope. That's just going to distract me from, unless the Lord is go apply for that job. I'm not going to do it because it's going to distract me from what I think he's taking me towards.
Yeah.
But it's just that surrender to get there. And it's very uncomfortable.
Growth, surrender, healing, all of it. It's so uncomfortable. That's why most people don't want to do it. They don't want to face their stuff. People can't give up control. They don't want to talk to therapists because they're afraid of diving in deep. They don't want to go down some of these routes because they just don't want to face themselves.
Right. That's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life is actually face who Stephen is. Yeah. It's been, obviously I had to do it a little bit. I had to admit my own wrongs to get out of my addiction. And that wasn't that hard, right? To just be able to point at myself and say, you did that. If you hadn't have done that, they couldn't have done that type thing. And it was hard at the time, but looking back, it's not as hard as getting a trauma counselor and having them ask you tough questions. And how did you feel about that? How did that make you feel? How do you think going through that and actually facing who Stephen is on the inside and my emotions and my thought process and why I treat people the way I do or why I can't receive. We talked about that as well. I'm a terrible receiver. I hate it because I don't know how to process the emotion because I didn't come from a loving family where I received. I came from an environment where people just took.
Yeah.
And so receiving is extremely hard for me. And I think that's actually part of the battle that I have to overcome is learning how to receive, because how can you truly give all of who you are unless you're willing to receive something in return? Right. Because that's what life's about.
If we can't receive all the grace, all the love, all the mercy of Christ, we got nothing to give.
Even just that aspect, receiving that, you're right.
We got nothing to give.
Right.
Like I talk about, we have this vertical relationship and horizontal relationship. We are the center of this. And if we can't receive fully this love because we still have our armor up, we can never have this.
Right.
So we're the conduit in the middle in order to have this. So we have to be able to open up and fully receive that before we can fully receive and give love and to earthly people and be able to carry on and have real relationships.
Right. No, that's a very valid point. And it's true. Just in receiving the love of the Father and not feeling worthless as you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of times that, if I'm being honest, I felt very worthless even when I knew the Lord was blessing me. It sucks. Yeah. And it all boils down to trauma, right? It all boils down to some traumatic event that happened in all of our lives individually. And like mine are mine, yours are yours, and everybody has their own. But it just creates that barrier and that guard and that veil that we use to protect ourselves. And in the end, we're not protecting ourselves. We're only making it worse.
Right. It's all about misaligned love.
Right.
Like at that point when you were a child, there were moments where you needed love, you needed nurturing, and you didn't receive it. And then now you're looking at life through that perspective for the rest of your life.
Right.
So you feel like you're not worthy of that love and you never deserve it. And we can't even accept it from the one that gives us freely.
Exactly.
So
yeah, it's a challenge accepting the Lord's love.
Yeah.
For me, it is. And I know that's weird to say, but I don't know how. And maybe that's what the whole point of all this is, right? It's just learning that.
Yeah.
Because then I can maybe truly be whole.
Right.
And not only just me, but all of us watching this, right? Like it's not just for me, it's for all of us.
Right. It's giving ourselves grace, giving ourselves forgiveness. A lot of people can't forgive themselves because of their past indiscretions. And one of the beautiful things that I never heard you once in this conversation play a victimhood mentality.
No, I did it.
Right. It's ownership, 100% ownership and accountability. And then that's a major thing too, is because we get stuck in this victimhood mentality. And, we can't forgive ourselves for the things that we've done. And we just keep ourselves in this perpetual cycle of beating ourselves up and feeling unworthy and feeling that guilt and shame of the things that we did, which keeps us stuck. Yeah. Keeps us from knowing and receiving that love.
I went through actually with that. I'm glad you brought that up because it wasn't easy to get that way. And I honestly had to literally start praying for people in my early 20s. And I'm a very forgiving person now. I won't forget it, but I'll forgive you and I'm not going to hold animosity towards you. I won't hold a grudge. I'll take you off the purge list. But at the end of the day, it's very hard to be able to do that. And the only way that I was able to do that was to literally pray for people I hated.
Yeah.
Even when I could only at first, and I'm not kidding, I could only at first do it in my head. I wouldn't even be able to utter the words. But now if I can pray for anybody I don't like, but there's nobody I used to viscerally hate people when I was younger. And I can honestly say I don't hate anybody and not even myself. I've made a lot of mistakes and that's okay because that's part of learning. Like I didn't learn to walk the first time. It's what do I do with those mistakes afterwards? And all of us, what do we do with them afterwards that truly matters?
Yeah. And that's what pure freedom is. The fact that you can pray for someone who has wronged you.
Yeah.
That is what pure freedom is.
Right.
And that's how we're taught. The golden rule used to be love others how you want yourself to be loved. Yeah. The platinum rule really is love others as Christ loves us.
Right.
So no matter what they did to you or how they act, you have to love them.
Exactly.
Like you said, forgiveness, all forgiveness does, that takes the poison away.
Right.
You don't forget about what happened. Like when we've been traumatized, we've been molested, we've been assaulted, whatever it might be, those things still happen and it's still real. But that forgiveness takes that poison away that's just going to continuously eat yourself up.
Right.
And that's what people think, I can't forgive someone. It still happened. You're still hurt.
And it's
you still
valid,
have that pain. That's valid.
Yeah.
But it's just taking that poison away that is just going to eat you up because you're never going to love yourself. You're never going to be able to care for others. And you're going to carry this to you to the day you die. It's going to make you die early because of that.
Right. And what most people don't understand and what I didn't understand is that unforgiveness only hurts you. Those people don't even think about it. It's not even in their head. It chews at you. And that's what causes the addictions and all the other things. And honestly, it was scripture. Like, I don't remember exactly what scripture it is, but Christ I think, isn't it in Hebrews? I don't remember. But Christ tells us if we do not forgive, we will not be forgiven.
Right.
And that was one of the things when I read that is what led to praying for other people.
Forgive others as I've forgiven you.
Yeah. And it was hard to do, but I still do it to this day. And for people that have wronged me years ago, I still pray for them because they're just broken people too, right? And don't get me wrong, there are some really evil people out there that are just content on hurting people. But in my opinion, and I would like to believe that I don't think most people are malicious like that. They do what they do because of what happened to them and how they were treated. And so whether it's lack of compassion, lack of empathy, or just sheer, they don't care, that all started from somewhere. Yeah. No one's born like that. Right. And so if you can't forgive somebody for making a mistake, especially yourself, like you have to be able to forgive yourself for making a mistake. But how can we expect to be forgiven?
Yeah. I mean, even when you're talking about your parents, immediately it was like, this happened, but I understand because they had that life, and that same.
It took me a lot of time to understand that. It does. Because I had a lot of animosity, man.
Right. But you have to go through pain and you have to see your own shit.
Yep.
Where you've caused problems in other people's lives because of your traits and the things that you've been through.
Yeah.
To realize, oh shit, they were just operating off that. They're broken love. They're misaligned.
Exactly.
Love.
And it's on that note, like now I understand my mom cheated on my dad and that's why my dad divorced my mom. Yeah. And now I get it. After being from the backside of infidelity, I understand why he did what he did. Yeah. He only made the best decision he had at the tools or with the information he had at the time. And whether it was a good decision or a bad decision, he thought it was the right decision.
So we get that empathy.
Right.
We can see things through other people's lenses at a time. And that's what this world needs a hell of a lot more of.
It is. 100%.
Every one of us, all we want is love. Right. It's all everybody who walks on this earth. They just want to know love and want to feel loved.
Right. And belonging as well.
Yeah.
Like just a feeling of actually feeling like you belong. I went through that with my marriage. Because the kids weren't mine, I've never told anybody this. I never felt like I belonged in that household. And I don't know how else to describe it but especially on holidays, on birthdays, things like that. Like I never felt like I belonged. Yeah. And that could just be a me thing. I don't know, but I can't imagine I'm the only person that goes through that.
Yeah. Yeah. That receiving thing.
Exactly.
Receiving the love of that family.
Yeah. I hate birthday gifts. For years, I will take off by myself on my birthday and I spend it by myself and I use it as a day of reflection. Like, what did I do with my life in the last year?
Yeah.
Versus I don't let people throw parties for me.
Right.
I've never been able to do that.
Yeah. We talked about it's a similar thing. So when he walks in my house with gifts and I hate gifts, both of us, and like as soon as he opens the door, he has these two things. I'm like, and then he goes, I hate gifts. And I'm like, me too. So we spoke the same language right away, but it's about receiving.
It is, right. Yeah, no. And I used to sell those.
Okay.
And it just the other day when I was thinking about coming on this, it popped in my head. You should give Brad one of those.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. I thank you for the gift.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. And I thank you for your time. Thank you for your vulnerability in your story. The things that you went through and experienced are just like, you could write a movie.
Right.
And the fact that here you are with a smile on your face and just such this beautiful perspective on life. It's just a testament to what God can do through us.
Right. And that's only part of the story.
That's it. That's it. We're just, hey, we're just, that's just it.
But yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And like I said before, I'm going to say it again. I truly appreciate you as well, because you've been very helpful to me as well. And I think that there's possibly something that the Lord could be doing here, that both of us. And so I appreciate your kindness and just your willingness to help me. And then also having me on here, man, because again, and like I said before, it's not about me and it's not about you. It's about the audience and what they see and what they receive.
Right.
And hopefully this touches something. They can either learn to forgive or learn to receive or just learn to forget or anything like that. Because like I said, I've been ashamed of my story for a long time. And most people that know me today have no clue that I was in prison and I was a meth addict. They just don't know because I was embarrassed by it. But my story is not for me.
Right.
It's for somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Because God's worked through you. He's healed you, released you of all this stuff.
Right.
So that way your story can be impactful. And
right.
The way you lead your life here on out can be impactful.
Exactly. And he didn't bring me all through all of this to not do something beautiful with it.
Yeah.
He has to have something like more than money.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just where I'm at with it. Right. There has to be something I can do for the kingdom of God in order to increase his glory. I don't know what that is, but I'm waiting.
I think we'll have to come back to the story in a couple of years and see where he's taking you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would
Beautiful.
love that. So
again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
All right, guys. Such an amazing interview. And I hope you took something away from that. And that's the premise of the Front Row podcast, is to get people on here to share their stories to something that hopefully you can relate to, whether it's through childhood trauma and the ways that you've carried out your life. And just grateful for you guys listening.
Have a great day.
This story ends today, but yours is still waiting to be told. You're not alone in this walk in life. If this hits you, share it with someone that needs it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Find me at Brad B. Rowe at Instagram. And if you're ready to step into the front row of your life, whether it be the fellowship, the foundry, coaching, or support the ministry, you can find it all at frontrow.co. I'll see you next week.